I truly don't think there's a better way to start a YouTube channel than with a long ass video in which I rank shows, just so you can easily decide whether you want to subscribe or just block me on sight and never see me again. So, hi, I'm Asya, and this is a tier list of all the queer shows I watched in 2024. But before we actually start talking about the shows, we should look at the tiers that I've prepared. As you can see, there's 7 of them, and we're starting with My Beloved, which is truly reserved for the creme de la creme, the best shows of this year that I was absolutely obsessed with. Then we go on to Almost Perfect, which is for shows that I liked a lot, but I'm not obsessed enough with them to add them to My Beloved, or there's maybe something small that bugs me. Then we have the very funny tier, It's Complicated. Why does this tier exist? Sometimes I have shit taste, and I know that these shows that I really love probably should not be ranked so high. So this tier is reserved for shows that may not be objectively good, but I happen to like. Then we have the perfectly watchable tier, which is full of shows that I think are good and you should watch them, but I don't think there's anything outstanding enough for me to rank them higher. Or maybe I liked them for the longest time and then something annoyed me so much that I just put them down a tier out of spite. Then we have The Thought Was There for shows that just did not manage to deliver, but I still think there's something worthwhile about them. Moving on, we have the disappointing tier, which is for shows that I was really excited about, but ended up being a disappointment, and I don't want to think about them anymore. And lastly, there is the Burn It With Fire tier, for shows that not only disappointed me so much I don't want to even look at them, but also I don't think they should exist. Starting with the shows that started airing in 2023, here we have Cooking Crush. Starting off strong, aren't we? For starters, the show had impossible odds to begin with because it came right after Not Me, which is considered to be not just Afghan's best BL, but one of the best Thai BLs in general. Anything that came after it was going to seem worse in comparison, so it's important to judge Cooking Crush as its own separate thing. And yet, things still didn't work out. It definitely deserves its spot in The Thought Was There tier. There are many things I liked about this show. Even though I wish for Afghan to leave university for good, I like the concept of a culinary student and a med student falling in love, and the former teaching the latter how to cook. Also, Afghan have never had the chance to portray such an adorable mutual panning dynamic before. In fact, I don't think we see that very often at all. I liked Ten and Prem both separately and together as a couple. I liked that the drama was never about whether or not they loved each other, but about becoming better people so that nothing can stop them from being together. I also loved Prem's friend group. The shenanigans were hilarious, but through them we also explored some serious topics about friendship and feeling like you're being left behind. I really like shows about cooking in general, and this one felt like a cooking anime from the 2000s or 2010s, down to the unlikable antagonist who want the main character to fail. Now on to the things I didn't like about it. The biggest issue was definitely the terrible editing, and that is not a first for this director. It was so bad that sometimes the show really did not make sense. The logical connection between scenes just weren't there, and that is the uncut version. I heard that the cut version straight up did not make sense sometimes. You did not know how they got from point A to point B. I also really did not like the side couple. They were not my cup of tea to begin with, but I thought that their execution in the show was pretty poor. And last but not least, I really didn't like the way the show ended. The way they resolved everything with Ten's dad was not my favorite. But also, I really don't think that Prem's team should have lost. There's a bit of a trend right now where if there's a competition, the main character is not going to win it. And I think that works in some shows, like for example in My School President, where even the loss was something valuable. But I think in a show like Cooking Crush, where the antagonist is so vile, letting him win in the end just fucking sucks. Next up, we have Pit Babe, which is the first show that I'm going to put in the My Beloved tier. Pit Babe sort of made news even from the get-go because of the Omegaverse premise. Funnily enough, I didn't even know it was an Omegaverse show. I actually thought that it was a racing show, which I guess is also true, but that was the reason why I wanted to watch it. In general, I like interesting premises that we don't see very often, like interesting occupations, interesting settings, etc. And a show about race car drivers seemed right up my alley in that regard. which is why I decided to watch to begin with. The Omegaverse was a surprise to me, a welcome one. I won't say that I'm necessarily a huge Omegaverse fan. However, I do think that it was kind of wild to see it on screen. The show kept getting wilder and wilder with each episode, and that was one of the things that made it so exciting to watch every week. Initially, I was not sure if I would be such a big fan of Babe as a character, but the moment he opened up about his tragic backstory, I was just done for. I have a tendency to like characters who seem hard on the outside, but are actually very soft on the inside. So really, if I actually didn't end up liking Babe, that would be weird. I also really like Charlie. To quote myself from one of the earlier episodes, I told one of my friends that I know he has an agenda, but he's so hilariously unhinged that I can't help but love him. And that just didn't change until the end of the show. I really like their dynamic, both in and outside of the bedroom. I thought that it was the exact opposite of what people might expect, and that made it very unique and interesting to watch. I also really like the rest of the characters and their whole found family in their garage, as well as the side couple, or side couples if you count Pete and Way, which didn't really go anywhere, and Norton Sonic, who were never confirmed but were quite obvious. I also need to give special shout out to Pete and Kenta, my favorite doomed yaoi, which has not let me have a single moment of peace ever since that episode aired. You know the one. Initially, I really loved the sign. I was waiting for it to come for a while, and the first few episodes definitely did not disappoint. In fact, I was so ecstatic about it. One thing I really liked about the show was the connection to Thai mythology. I like mythology a lot to begin with, so I got so excited about it that I went on a big research spree. I read so much about the Naga and the Garuda and the stories connected to them. I went in deep. And I also really liked the characters, especially Paya and Tarn, both, individually and as a couple. I like the conflict between them. Paya, who is so in love with Tarn that he's ready to do anything to be together, and Tarn, who is afraid to love because of what that might mean for Paya, how Paya can get hurt if Tarn allows himself to love him, even though he knows that he loves him already. It's the kind of thing that is so tragic that it really does me in. Also, another thing that needs to be mentioned is the production value of this show. It is definitely the best looking Taipei I've seen, especially, with all of the mythological creatures that were made with CGI. Saint put so much money into it, and it shows. So why is the sign in perfectly watchable and not in any of the above tiers? See, it's really hard to make a mystery slash detective show in which the main characters are supposed to be police without falling into propaganda. And unfortunately, the sign is not exempt from that. There was a moment in the show where I really had to sit down and be like, I really do not agree with what our main characters were saying. And it wasn't just one or two of them, they were all on what I consider to be the wrong side morally. And that was just kind of really off putting. The show also had a pretty rushed ending, which was rather disappointing, especially with how polished the show had been until now in so many ways. Moving on to the first show in this list that is written by Dr. Salmon. I am a very big fan of shows based on her books, so when I learned that she'd become a scriptwriter under Beyond Cloud, I was very excited. TFF is still one of my favorite things to have come out in the past year. I'm a huge advocate of BLs in a variety of genres, so when I heard that this show is essentially a slasher but all the characters are gay, I was super stoked. I do think, unfortunately, that the show left things to be desired at the end. The ending wasn't necessarily my favorite. There are some things that I would have changed. However, I just had such a good time watching it. I was so excited about it the whole way through. I really like theorizing, so it was so fun to theorize with my friends about what's going on and overanalyze pretty much everything. And I thought that the characters were all pretty strong. Not good people. There are very few who one could say were good people objectively, but I like them flawed as they are. Some of them, even flawed, does not begin to cover it, and I love that for them. You can tell that this is Salmon's first script writing job because there were a couple of things that I think even she knows that she could have done better. And those things are what sort of holds the show back from being in my very top tier. Next, we have the movie After Sundown. Maybe this does not count because it actually came out in the summer of 2023, which is nowhere near the end of it. However, it did come to Netflix in January of 2024, which is when I watched it. And since I just really, really love this movie, I couldn't help but indulge myself and include it in this list. Initially, I was going to put this in It's Complicated, because even though I love it a lot, I am aware that it has a lot of flaws. It's a movie with a very strong concept, but the execution leaves things to be desired. However, not too long ago, I actually saw the uncut version of the movie, which is just vastly better. It makes the movie make a lot more sense and it flows a lot better, which was enough for me to bump it up a tier. So what is After Sundown about? It's a period drama in which the main character, Rui, played by Nunu, has to get spiritually married to Z's character, Plunk, in order to save him from misfortune or something like that. However, when he goes to live into this house, he starts getting plagued by nightmares, haunted by a ghost, etc. And that seems to be something that happens only to him. Again, I like the fact that we're trying out different genres with this horror-esque type of movie. It actually did give me a fright a couple of times, but that is just because I'm a scaredy cat. The other reason why I like it is because I actually really, really liked the main couple. Rui and Plunk, God, they hate each other so much when they first meet, and the only reason Rui actually goes through it is because Plunk doesn't want to do it. And he just wants to get, spiritually married to him out of spite and no other reason whatsoever. Who doesn't love a good enemies to lovers romance? Oh, well, I suppose you can call it annoyance to lovers because it's not like they're enemies. It's just so satisfying to see them go from point A to point B, from being really, really annoyed with each other to being very deeply in love with each other. And lastly, of the shows that started airing last year, we have Last Twilight, which will be the only show that will go into the Burn It With Fire tier. By now, everyone and their mother has talked about Last Twilight and how it crashed and burned, so I will keep these brief. After the pilot trailer got released, it easily became one of my most anticipated shows of that year. I had slight reservations about the plot being about someone losing their eyesight and then being miserable about it, if only because there are ways to explore disabled people without just talking about how they're so miserable to be disabled. However, because of Moonlight Chicken, which came out previously that year, I was very confident in how Piaf was going to tackle the disability storyline, only to be very disappointed. I still do not know how it's done by the same director. I just don't understand. But beyond that, there are also other things that I didn't really like in the show. In fact, I think I got kind of bored by it earlier than most people did. I think by episode 8 or 7, I was kind of slightly checked out. Then the dad storyline happened and I hated that. And then the next storyline happened and I hated that. And then the ending happened and I also hated that. If that was meant to be the ending all along, then I think that the direction of the plot and the characters should have been different. As a big fan of Ossan's Love, I was delighted to hear that there was going to be a new season this year. And honestly, this season did not disappoint. Maki and Haruta finally get to be a proper couple since neither of them is forced to go for work overseas. It's not easy to make a good show about an established relationship, but I think that this manages to do it quite well. They finally get to be happy and in love, and they're so adorable, but they also struggle with issues that a lot of couples struggle with all the time. And they're not the only ones, too. We see all the characters we know and love go through the struggles of life, especially now that they're a lot older. There's this reoccurring topic of in-laws. For example, Maki, who is freaking out because he wants to impress Haruta's mother, Haruto, who has to take care of his father-in-law who's had a health issue because Maki isn't in Japan to do it. Kyoko struggling to interact with Maru's mother because while she is her mother-in-law, she is also younger than her. I particularly enjoyed the episode that was focused on Chizu, who is a working mom who often needs help from friends and family to take care of her son, which makes her feel like a failure of a mom. But her friends and family reassure her that asking for help is a normal thing to do. Unfortunately, I have to say that I wasn't as invested in the storylines of the new characters they added, and that I still don't like Kurosawa. I was really hoping that in this new season I could form a new opinion on him, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And that is the reason why I've decided to put the show in almost perfect. If I had to try and pick which is my favorite show of the year based on the story and the story structure alone, I probably would have to say Love for Love's Sake. Right off the bat, the concept is really unique. Our main character, Myung-ha, gets stuck in a game where he has to make one of the characters happy, and then he falls in love with him in the process. This alone reminds me very much of Triage, which is my favorite BL of all time. So it comes as no surprise that I loved Love for Love's Sake as well, and can easily put it in the top tier. I think all of the characters are very fascinating. They all have their own issues that make them very interesting. And it's sweet how they end up having this very unlikely friendship as Myung-ha brings them together. Even though Myung-ha is our main character, we really don't know too much about him until the very end where everything gets revealed. I honestly don't think I should have binged the show because then it was so difficult to recover from it emotionally. But I'm really excited to revisit it because I think it's the kind of show that only gets better when you rewatch it and you see all the things that are laid there for you to find. In 2024, we were promised a lot of vampire BLs, some of which have arrived to us and others which have not. The one I'm going to talk about today is one that I feel like gets overlooked very often. 1000 Years Old is a vampire show that feels very unlike vampire shows. When I think about vampire shows, I think of something more dark and like goth or something like that, while 1000 Years Old is very bright, very bubbly, very colorful. And I think that actually works in its favor. It tells a story of a vampire and a human who frequent the same blood soup food stall, which eventually gets closed down, so the two of them, alongside other characters, are trying to get it up and running again. The premise is very mundane, honestly, and it just works. The characters are all very lovable, very unique. The human is an alien enthusiast who often goes UFO hunting with his friends, and the vampire is the most nice and polite vampire you have ever seen. Combine the two and you get the clumsiest and most adorable love story ever told. 1000 Years Old is my feel-good show of the year, and I really wish I could rank it higher than I have, but unfortunately towards the middle it becomes a little bit repetitive, and then the ending I think could have been a little bit stronger. Still, it's a show that I remember very fondly, and for that reason it has earned a spot in the almost perfect tier. There's something about Japanese BLs that just hits different, and Perfect Propose is no exception to that. It tells a story of our main character Hiro, who is an overworked office worker, and his childhood friends slash fiance, because they promised to get married when they were children, as you do. The two of them reunite after having not seen each other for a very long time, and the best friend Kai starts living with Hiro since he has nowhere to go. A lot of people didn't seem to like this show because it didn't focus so much on the romance as much as on the characters. I, however, think that is one of the show's biggest strengths. It's a wonderful character-driven show in which the romance between the two of them is a little bit more subtle and it sort of develops as they do as people. It is also, I think, a wonderful expose on the toxic work culture in Japan. Hiro is so overworked and his job depresses him so much that he doesn't even want to go to sleep because he knows you have to wake up in the morning and go to work again. When Kai enters his life, you see how he fundamentally changes for the better, even by doing small things like making food for him so he doesn't have to eat convenience store food every day. The love story would not be possible without the character development throughout the story, and they come together in a beautiful way in the end. The show is also so real on the topic of the toxic office culture in Japan. Hiro dedicates everything to his job and he's so good at it, and yet his bosses make him feel like he's incompetent because if he believes that he's incompetent, then he'll never think about quitting his job and going to another company that will actually value him. For that alone, the show deserves the highest praise. However, I will say that I do think it might have been nice to have more romance towards the end after both of their character arcs have come to an end. And for that reason, I have decided to put it into the almost perfect tier. So this next one is complicated to say the least. Deep Night certainly is a show that I'm not sure I can recommend to people, and yet I actually had a lot of fun watching it. It is really one of those ones. And I think one of the main reasons the It's Complicated category exists in this tier list. For starters, the main character Kem isn't all that interesting, neither is his blossoming relationship with Wella. Wella himself, the love interest, is a character that I do enjoy a lot though. And I have to admit that I did enjoy their relationship post getting together. If there really is a competition about the freakiest thing that has been done on a rooftop, they would win it easily. But what is it that makes this show so complicated for me to rank? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main character, Kem, is the son of Madame Freya, who owns the top host club in the country called Deep Night. So already, I think, interesting setting, especially because they do a lot of acrobatic shows. I only wish that we actually got to see more of those acrobatic shows. They start off strong with them and then you kind of don't really see too much of them by the end. But when you do see them, they are really cool. The setting allowed for interesting discussions about what it means to be in a relationship with a host. It also has a poly side ship. There is these three guys who manage to negotiate a poly arrangement by the end of the show, as well as a lesbian side ship of two adult women, one of which is actually a MILF. Put a pin on that because we will return to it later. I decided to give 23.5 a chance, even though high school shows are not my thing, because it was GMMTV's first GL, and it starred Milk Love, who I love from Bad Buddy. But it is very much the kind of show that I would not watch had it not been a GL. I'm actually a big fan of the two-person love triangle trope, where one person is being their own worst enemy, the way Ongsa was in the beginning of 23.5. I was really impressed by Mook's acting because she's so beautiful that when you look at her, you don't really think that she'd be able to convince you that she's a loser, and yet I did manage to get the loser energy from Ongsa. While watching the show, I really try to keep in mind the fact that the characters are teenagers who are going to act like teenagers. But at one point, Ongsa's actions made the situation seem so unbearable for both her and Sun, it was needlessly cruel and I really wanted it to stop. And the last arc didn't make anything better, so I guess the GMMTV can't end their shows, period, not just their BLs. I was also a victim to the secondary ship syndrome in this show because I was way more interested in Eileen and Luna and their relationship, and I also really enjoyed Eileen's character, even though I didn't always like the way the narrative was treating her. It's honestly a bit of a shame that I have to rank GMMTV's first GL so low, but here's to hoping that the next ones will be much better. Remember when I said that I like shows with very unique premises? Well, we're about to see one like that. Our main character, Cram, gets transported to a parallel world after the death of the man he loves, and in this world, he meets the other main character, Tai. See, the thing is, in the world where Cram comes from, Tai was involved with the death of Cram's mother, so understandably, Cram doesn't really like him. But in this world where he's entered currently, the two of them used to be lovers before the Cram of this universe died. Well, he was murdered. I was really impressed by Max's acting in this show. Unfortunately, I do think that Nat leaves things to be desired, but I didn't mind him for the most part, and their chemistry together is electrifying. It's the kind of chemistry that sometimes really makes you feel like you shouldn't be watching this. I especially liked Max's character Tai. He was always, brooding and yearning over someone who was seemingly unreachable. Cram was interesting too because he was torn between his feelings for his original lover, who was the reason he came to this world to begin with, and his new blossoming feelings for Tai. Overall, I loved the main couple. I really liked the side couple, although I wish they had more development. And I thought that the concept was very unique, but the writing was way too convenient. Editing that happened was way too easily resolved. And I don't necessarily think that that's a major flaw in a show's writing. I can still enjoy it, but I really cannot rate it any higher than this. Here's another show from the thought was there tier. I will be perfectly honest actually that the fact that we are even got this far is very impressive. When I first watched the trailer, I had no intention of actually watching the show. For one, I'm very much over shows that are about university, and also, I don't really trust New Suage to direct comedy well. The show also felt like a downgrade for Pon Point, who I'd really liked in Never Let Me Go the previous year. Still, when it started airing and I saw the gifs circulating the internet, I actually thought that it didn't look half bad and maybe I should at least give it a chance. What made this show was the way the friendships in it were written. There's the friendships from high school and there's the friendships from university and so on. For some reason, every single one of them felt extremely believable, and their shenanigans were also reminiscent of stuff I've done in university. They just felt very real in the way they worked, especially when you see, for example, how Tan is with his friends from high school and then how he is with his friends from university. And the way they interact with each other is also very realistic. They come together, but they don't really disappear into one big friend group. They're still their own separate thing. So even though I'm gushing so much about the friendships in the show, why is it that I've ranked it so low? Well, I kind of wish that there was something else that I liked about it, seeing as I'm watching a BL, you know? There are four couples in it, and by the end, I don't think that I cared too much about any of them. There was a period during which I really liked Q and Toy, but even that kind of fizzled out. By the end of the show, both Q and Toy and Pum and Pin felt like they were repeating the same scenes over and over again, while the other two couples, Tan and Fang and Chain and Pun, were left kind of underdeveloped, especially Chain and Pun. And I know that was because there was a cast change, but I still feel like there was no reason to rush out with a release of We Are and have their relationship feel very underdeveloped. I guess we'll never know if the relationship was originally the way that it was, or that's just a result of the cast change and the rush of the production of the show. But as it is, both Chain and Pun and Tan and Fang were couples that I was actually very interested in, and then I kind of never really got what I wanted. I do think it would be nice to get more slice of life shows like We Are, but I think that the directors in charge need to think better about the pacing of the show so that it doesn't end up repetitive and boring at the end like We Are did. I really like the vibes of Wandee Goodday. It kind of reminds me of JoJo's Warp Effect. It portrays sex as something very fun, and I don't think we see that all that often. It also had an asexual character who was treated with respect and ended up in a relationship by the end of the show. I really loved Wandee and Yoyak, and you really had to laugh at how stupid their arrangement became the more you saw how much they loved each other. But the ones who truly stole my heart in the show were Oye and Cher, the side couple. So I was having the time of my life for the first maybe 7 or 8 episodes, and then at some point I felt like the show really lost its direction. Wandee and Yoyak actually getting together was delayed for way too long for reasons that I really could not understand because they both knew that they liked each other. I also felt like the show was kind of inconsistent in some of the points it tried to make because they made such a big deal about the way treated Tem, as they should have, but then Ter forcefully kisses Wandee multiple times and it didn't carry the same weight, even though it should have. And what really was the final nail in the coffin for me was the storyline with the dad. There was just no way they could spin it in which I could sympathize with him about the loss of his wife when he left his sons who also were, suffering from the loss of their mother. And that basically made me knock it down a tier, and it ended in perfectly watchable. I did say we would come back to the lesbians from Deep Night. The Two of Us is a side story of Deep Night, and the events of the series happen at the same time as the ones in Deep Night. It features Madame Freya, the owner of the Deep Night Host Club, and her childhood friend Meiji. So this show essentially fills in the gaps about their relationship. So like I said, it's the adult women Yuri we deserve. Both of them are at least 40 years old because Freya already has a child who is in university. I really love the chemistry between the two actresses, and Freya and Meiji are just very cute. But I cannot rank it any higher than perfectly watchable because it really doesn't have plot to speak of, it just banks on chemistry and cute moments. I actually had no desire to watch Century of Love initially because the plot didn't appeal to me that much and I wasn't a fan of San's character at first. But my friends really seem to like it, and I've been a big fan of this director's other works like To Serve With Love and Laws of Attraction, so I decided to give Century of Love a try, and I'm really glad I did. This director's works always lean heavily into the Lacorn, and that always makes them feel very unique. I loved all the characters in the show, but Wee was easily my favorite, followed closely by Chu. But I have to give props to Dao for actually making me believe that this is the man who is 100 years old. He really managed to sell it. But what truly elevated the series for me is how they resolved the big conflict of is Wee actually Wad? Had they made him a reincarnation of Wad, that would have cheapened the love Cyan and we have for each other because it would feel like he only fell for him because he was Wad. I like that we never learn if he's Wad or not, and ultimately it doesn't matter because San picked him anyway. Maybe the trainee should have been in the disappointing tier, because I certainly was disappointed with it by the end. But by the time it started going downhill, I was already too invested and I cannot let it go. So for this reason, I will place it in It's Complicated. While it certainly had a main character and a main pair, it still felt more like an ensemble show, especially since in the first episode it focused more on the five trainees and you really got to see more of Jane only by the end of the episode and then, from episode 2 onwards. I loved all of the characters and I was always excited to see the little shenanigans, see how they were going to learn and grow, and I loved their friendship together and how it was developing. I also loved Jane and Ryan's relationship, how it started as an intern and his mentor, and then gradually changed into something else. It was true off gun excellence. I especially loved Jane. He's definitely one of my favorite characters of this year, and I think he awakened something in all of us who watch a trainee because we're all obsessed with him. Honestly, I even loved the drama with Tay, Bami, and Judy, dramatic and messy as it was, because it felt real. The scene in which Bami breaks up with Tay is one of the best in the show, in my opinion. I was a Bami defender for the longest time until she decided that she really had to go back to her boyfriend after breaking up with him, insisting that he didn't treat her well enough. Yeah, I don't think it makes sense either. And at least you can see that Tay is actually making an effort to be a better boyfriend, but Bami has just reverted to who she was before they broke up, and then you really have to wonder why we needed to have this to begin with. It's not that I think Bami should have gotten with Judy. In fact, I think the best ending for her would have been to just be on her own. But I'm really not sure what GMMT was thinking when they teased a potential Savick relationship in the trailer of the show, and then they delivered this. The drama, which ultimately amounted to nothing, wasted so much time which could have been spent on Jane and Ryan instead. Their development in the last few episodes really was not that great, and that time skip in the last episode was horrible. I actually think that The Trainee is one of the shows that would have benefited from a time skip, but not the way they did it. This Love Doesn't Have Long Beans was the first show to air from Change's lineup for this year. I don't often get second ship syndrome, however, I was really feeling it here. And it wasn't because I had any expectations before the show. I know there was a lot of people who were really excited to see Benz and Garfield as a pair ever since Pit Babe, but I was always very neutral on this idea. However, I really like the dynamic of their characters in this show. One of them is like a good boy, self righteous, kind of a little bit hot headed, and the other one is a rich boy with no morals who learns to care and changes by the end, to some extent at least. It's definitely giving Chan and Tin from Laws of Attraction, but in a rom com setting. So, me liking them a lot was not a surprise to anyone. I was definitely less interested in the main ship, although I definitely really liked the main character Juan. He was very charming as a protagonist, and it was just hilarious that whenever he had to make a choice, he would always pick the wrong one. I was, however, pleasantly surprised with how invested I was in the later development of the ship, since I didn't think I cared enough about it. I also respect them for desecrating a kitchen multiple times, because quite frankly, if you're going to do a BL about cooking and you're going to have NC scenes and you don't desecrate the kitchen, then you're just a coward. Overall, I thought it had a pretty solid execution. It's just that there was nothing about it that made me go, wow, and give me a reason to place it any higher. The Two of Us also has a second season, which was unfortunately a huge disappointment. It's not that I thought the first season was exceptional or anything, but at least I thought it was enjoyable to watch, which I can't really say about this one. If I thought that the original one didn't have too much plot, then this one has negative plot. And the chemistry of the actresses really isn't enough to save it this time. 4 Minutes was definitely one of the shows with the most interesting premise this year, and I have big faith in Salmon's writing, so I was definitely really excited about it, especially since I'm a big fan of what I like to call time fuckery. I was sort of endeared by Time from the very beginning because he kind of reminded me of Tin from Triage. Obviously, their goals are very different, but they both approached the guy with an ulterior motives, and they were both pretty bad at acting normal in front of him. Great, I needed more time to get attached to, but the moment I realized what a freak he was, we all know when, I was all in. But truly, the one who stole the show for me was definitely my murder kitten, Tonka. I've been a big fan of Wise ever since DFF, where he played my favorite character, and now he's did it again. Tonka was just so fascinating, and the true mess of the show was truly his relationship with Korn and Win. Both of them toxic in their own right. I love how he showed different sides of him in his relationship with both of them to the point that he almost seemed like a different person. My big concern truly was whether or not they were going to give the show a satisfying ending, and I actually think that they managed to do that, even though it was kind of exactly what I expected from it. Which is to say, a happy ending for Great and Time, and then a bad ending for just about everyone else. Conan Tonkla's tragic ending actually made me love them more. I love a good tragedy, and they had tragedy written all over them. So 4 Minutes easily goes into the highest tier, my beloved, but I really gotta ask why we need a second season? But I guess that's a concern for next year. So after finishing the Paradise of Thorns, I had to sit down and stare at a wall for 10 minutes. Don't get me wrong, I expected this movie to be upsetting, but somehow it was more upsetting than I thought it could be. Every time I thought that things just couldn't get worse, they somehow got worse. Every time I thought that, oh, the movie's surely ending, it just was not ending. We just kept going and going. And I honestly loved every single moment of it. When I started it, I had two favorite movies, and now I have three favorite movies. That's how much I love it. So the My Beloved tier is a no-brainer, really. It's not the kind of movie that I can recommend to everyone. I understand that. It's very upsetting, it has a lot of trigger warnings, and people just really need to proceed with caution when they watch it. But it ended up being the perfect tragedy, and I truly love it. In the trailer, it says that the movie is inspired by the inequality, and initially it seems that that inequality is the fact that gay people cannot get married and therefore they're seen as friends in the eyes of the law, which is the situation our main character Tom Cam is in. Both him and his boyfriend put everything in their durian orchard, but after his boyfriend's death, all that matters is the fact that the land is in his name and therefore everything is in his name. It doesn't matter how much money Tom Cam himself put into it. But as you watch the movie, you realize that that is not all they mean when they talk about inequality. You can see a different kind of inequality in the character of Mo, whose life as a woman has been very difficult. And sure, she does a lot of things you can easily hate her for, but ultimately you realize that she is a victim too. In reality, Tongkam and Mo are really not all that different. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. The acting is phenomenal, especially from Eng Fa and Jeff, and the cinematography is beautiful. So if you like heavy movies that might be difficult to watch, but will ultimately stay with you and make you think, as well as morally great characters, then you should definitely watch The Paradise of Thorns. Jack and Joker was easily one of my most anticipated shows of the year, and then the first episode was fantastic, one of the best I've seen in a while. And then things just kind of ended up going downhill. It's not like the Trainee, where I thought the show was solid for most of its run. Instead, while there were a lot of things that I loved about the show, there was also one big thing that annoyed me, which was the fact that it left you with the impression that all poor people had to also be good people. And the biggest victim of that early on was Tattoo, who was the character who made the wrong choices every now and then. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind him getting reprimanded by the characters, especially Joker, who he put into a pretty bad situation, but I do mind him getting reprimanded by the narrative. Poor people doing bad things in order to survive is a thing that happens, and by trying to put them all in the same box, they're portraying poverty in a way that is very surface level. Sometimes it really was comical, like that time Tattoo's mom, who is one of the reasons why he's in debt now, who has seen him get beaten up multiple times because of the debt she and his father put him in. She tells him that he really should return this necklace he stole to the rich person he stole it from because it's the only thing he has to remember his dead mother by. Aren't there more pressing issues than a rich person's comfort? Why is that your main concern when you and your son have had to go into hiding because of your debt? At least I thought the writing for Jack and Joker and the development of their relationship was very solid for most of the show. I loved both their confession scene and their first kiss, but the moment they actually get together, they start feeling incredibly out of character. Like that time Jack is telling Joker that he will now prioritize only him because he's his boyfriend, as Jenny's character gets dragged off by debt collectors, which later on leads to her death. But sure, so cute how he only cares about Joke now. I really don't know who sat down and wrote this thinking it was okay, and I also don't know who approved it after that. It makes both Jack and Joke feel like awful people, which I know they're not. And last but not least, I always get really irritated by a show that has a super long runtime and somehow cannot really manage its screen time very well. The episodes are so long, and yet we barely saw Save and Hope, and Tattoo and Aran's development kind of led to nothing. At this point, I'm not even sure if they were meant to be a ship because it sure felt like it, but then nothing happened. They also dropped the ball on Aran's character development. He was my favorite for the longest time, and then his arc kind of led to nothing as well. His complicated relationship with his dad was treated as the butt of the joke, and in the end, he had no proper closure and went to take care of the man who never cared for him in the first place. I know Jack and Joker was a passion project for Yin and War. It's a very ambitious project that they funded themselves, as far as I know. Unfortunately, I was really disappointed with the show. Love Bully tells the story of two women from different walks of life who meet, fall in love, and then have to fight for their love. I will be honest and say that there is nothing in the show that feels truly innovative. There is a mother who doesn't approve of her daughter being a lesbian and of her daughter at all, and she is a looming threat over the girls at all times. The story is very dramatic, very Lacorn-like, so if you like this sort of thing like I do, that's a plus. The series has a really short runtime of only 4 episodes, and that definitely impacts it because a lot of things end up feeling rushed. However, I really like both of the main characters, Irene and Knight. They both have their own struggles that they have to get through by the end of the series in order to be together. But probably the biggest thing I appreciate about it is the fact that Knight has a transgender parent. Her dad has come out as a trans woman and now lives as her Aunt Jo. The series shows us how society treats her unfairly just because of who she is, and how that even impacted the life of her daughter. But Knight loves her and accepts her as she is, and their relationship is the sweetest thing ever. It was actually one of the scenes with Aunt Jo that made me raise this show a tier. It's far from perfect, but both Engfa and Charlotte were fantastic, and I love it too much to put it in perfectly watchable, so I will put it in It's Complicated and leave it at that. Unintentional Love Story is one of my favorite KBOs, so I was really looking forward to the movie Time of Fever, which would explore the past of Hote and Donghee. I knew I would love this movie, and yet it still ended up exceeding my expectations. I actually ended up reading the manhwa after watching the show, but there really was very little content of the two of them in there, so I like how the movie expanded on the little there was in the manhwa. Truly no one does yearning like Donkey and Hote, and the actors portrayed it so beautifully. Donkey is my poor son who hurts himself in his confusion and then hurts Hote in the process as well. The plot is very simple. What is complex are their feelings. It's so clear that they both love each other and that it really shouldn't be so hard for them to be together. But Donghi seems to think that he did something bad just because he fell in love with Hote. And the whole time, Hote doesn't quite understand why he's being pushed away this way. The angst is just beautiful and I love it. Time of Fever also gave me what I think are some of the best kisses in KBL. I don't watch enough KBL to say that those are the best kisses definitively, but let's just say if I was trying to make a list of my favorite kisses of the year, both of the kisses in Time of Fever would make it at the top. I suppose the only thing holding Time of Fever back a little bit is the fact that there is no way to give it a proper ending, seeing it is a prequel to an intentional love story, and the love story isn't resolved in that either. So I suppose we can only hope for a new season of an intentional love story, or at the very least, a special episode. Come on, just give it to us. Love is Like a Poison has become my new favorite JBL, and I can easily put it in the My Beloved tier. It's about this cold and stern genius lawyer and the sexy con artist who keeps flirting with him. I'm a connoisseur of law dramas, and this one was a very good one. A lot of law dramas focus on murder cases, but I like that there was a variety of different cases here. I really love both main characters. Roma is a classic tsundere who thinks he doesn't need anyone, but then you see his soft side when he talks to his houseplants. And yes, they answer to him, and it's as silly as it is adorable. And then there's Haruto, who is the complete opposite of him. He's so good at manipulating people to give him exactly what he wants that at first you really don't know where the mask ends and the person begins, how much of his flirting with Roma is actually genuine. They get together halfway through the show, and I really like the way their relationship is written in the second half. I can actually believe that Ryoma loves Haruto and wants to be in this relationship with him, but at the same time, he doesn't feel like a completely different person, but like an evolved version of who he was. Everything he does is still in character, but he's just motivated by something different. And then there's Haruto, who wants to be happy in this relationship, but his past is coming back to haunt him. It's a testament to how good these characters are that I really cannot decide which of them is my favorite. If you're still here after all that yapping, I'm very thankful. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one, where I will hopefully have a script.